Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's virtual leadership workshop. This morning, I'm pleased to introduce Rachel Bailey, who is the director of the Deaf and Community Service Department for the Pennsylvania State Grange, who will be leading our discussion this morning about community service in the age of a pandemic. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Rachel.
Awesome. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. As Jen already pointed out, we're part of the Pennsylvania State Grange, and I am the director of the Deaf and Community Service. So we help our local chapters all across the state achieve their community service goals and partake on a state level. For those who may be viewing who aren't familiar with the Grange, either now or later, the Grange is an agricultural-based group that focuses on personal development, as well as achieving the development of local granges in legislation and community service. So just a little bit on the history of the Grange with Pennsylvania. And I would like to introduce our four panelists for today's discussion, who are experts in their field. They've been hands-on before, during, and they're continually evolving during these really ever-changing times. So first, I would like to introduce you to Elaine Beck, who is the Executive Director for the State College Food Bank. Elaine, could you share a little bit with your background?
Hi, thanks for having me this morning. So I'm the executive director at the State College Food Bank. I took on that role actually in February of last year. So I stepped into that role and then we walked into a pandemic. So that was kind of my first experience here as director. I had previously been here for 3 years as our business manager. So I thankfully was very well versed in our operation and what we needed to have done here. So I think that kind of set me on a better path heading into a pandemic. But I'm a native of State College, so I'm very connected into our community. I grew up here, so I spent time as a volunteer myself, and now I work for a service organization within the community. And I am excited to be here today.
Thank you so much. All right, next I would like to introduce Justin Eberle. He is what I've heard and would describe as a jack of all trades in emergency response and training. Justin, a little bit from you.
Sure. So I definitely wear plenty of hats, but that is kind of the life of the volunteer in emergency services in Pennsylvania. I actually got my involvement started in emergency services as taking the first aid merit badge as a Boy Scout, and just kept on taking training. And now I'm a nationally registered advanced EMT and firefighter, and I work full time in the insurance industry doing risk management, and I work directly with our clients who are emergency services organizations as well. So that's really my background that I've continued to kind of thrive in when disasters and emergencies strike, which it seems to be the world that we're in today. That's what it is. But that's where I've focused my career and my obviously volunteer pursuits that parallel that.
Thank you. Wonderful. And then in the same screen, we have Tammy Jorkowski from the Progress Grange and Denny McCloskey, the president of the Progress Grange. Welcome to this morning.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome. You can go first.
Okay. Well, I'm president of Progress Grange, and Tammy is my secretary. Well, me personally, I've volunteered in many organizations over the years, from PTO to music boosters to education foundations, and of course now with the Grange. So I also wear a lot of hats. Sometimes I wear many capes, and that's kind of where I am right now. And I love doing what we do.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much. Just let's dive right into it. One thing I wanted to start off with was that maybe we've all participated in before and are really familiar with our food banks. And Elaine, just to get us started, how has the pandemic affected your day-to-day operations?
It affected us quite drastically. So previously our food bank was set up as a client choice pantry, which means people could come in and go shopping like a grocery store. So that had to kind of change when the pandemic started. We weren't willing, we didn't shut down like everything else, but we needed to be more careful about social distancing and keeping people safe. And we work with a very vulnerable population. So we wanted to make sure that our clients were safe too, and however we were distributing food. So we moved to a modified kind of distribution where we pre-packed some bags, and then we gave clients choice. They had lists they could kind of choose from the food that they want. It's really important to us that we're not sending food home that's just going to get thrown away and creating more food waste. We want to make sure that people are getting food in their house that they want to eat. So we've become very crafty and clever with, I feel like right now we're kind of a really low end version of like a giant direct pickup or Walmart pickup because we don't have a fancy online ordering system or, you know, a phone number to call, but we work really hard with our clients to make sure that they're getting the food that they need. So, and I know a lot of this, we wanted to talk today about volunteering. So we definitely decreased quite drastically the number of volunteers we have in our building to operate. So normally we have 100+ volunteers that come in weekly to run our operation, and we had to decrease down to about 50. So it was pretty hard on our staff at first, but we've got a good system now, and we're slowly kind of trying to figure out how to get back to the before time, if you will, but also still be mindful of what's going on around here and what we need to be doing to keep people safe.
I personally have been to the Harrisburg Central PA Food Bank to participate in their system that they have set up there in the farm show building. And I was really impressed with the intake of all the volunteers, of, you know, making sure everybody's listed for contact tracing, provided gloves, sanitizer, and you know, how the teams were just set up in their assembly line. So I think it was, from a firsthand perspective, a really seamless process and made me want to go back again. So
yeah, they do a great job, and we're a partner of theirs. And as one of their partner agencies, they were really helpful throughout this whole pandemic of kind of sending best practices and making sure we had the PPE and all the stuff that we need. So Central Pennsylvania Food Bank definitely has made a big impact throughout the state. And I know firsthand as an agency, they've been very helpful in making sure that all their partner agencies are able to continue to stay open.
Justin, a little bit from you and the first responders. You know, when we were all, you know, almost felt like we were scared to walk outside, what did it look like for the people who did not have the option? They were there to serve us.
Sure. Well, there was certainly no traffic on the roadways, which was, we saw some reduction in even the auto accidents that we respond to. Just thinking of those initial periods where everybody was staying at home, there was actually an unintended consequence that we started to find out as we started to analyze the data of our call volumes across the state. And one common trend that we saw is people didn't even want to be in the hospital. So a lot of they didn't want to go to their doctor's appointments. They didn't want to do anything that might put them at any type of risk of contracting COVID. So one of the things we saw is people were putting off their normal regimented healthcare routines. So they didn't go for their physician's doctor visits. They didn't go and get their medications adjusted how they might need to. They didn't go to the emergency room unless they absolutely needed to. So we were seeing more severe patients on our ambulances. We were also seeing more critical emergencies outside of the hospital. So, you know, normal day to day, we'll go and have a number of medical calls, whether it's a fire department or an ambulance service. What we started to see was those calls become less frequent. We actually saw a drop off in call volume, but more severe. So I can tell you there was 1 month where we ran just as many cardiac arrests where we needed to do CPR in a 1 month period than I recall doing in probably a year previous. So that's a important thing that we saw, and really the messaging got out pretty quickly that if you have healthcare issues, you need to be getting those taken care of even in the midst of COVID. So a lot of things started to ramp up, like telemedicine and some other things, alternatives to making sure people stayed healthy in other ways, pandemic aside.
Wow, thank you. Denny and Tammy, you know, the Grange, where my feeling on the Grange is just about community and getting together, having meetings and sharing meals with one another. for you guys, how did you experience a change in your day-to-day operations with having meetings with your membership and projects?
For the first couple of months, we canceled all the meetings and just kind of stayed in touch via phone. And we did actually have our first Zoom. We only had to have one. So that was interesting. We have a lot of older members, so to get them on board, a lot of people just listened in over the telephone. But I think the close knit group of ours are actually volunteered with our food distribution. So we still saw the main people in our range.
Awesome. Great. Well, every organization, big or small, needs volunteers. And, how, to all of you, how has it affected your ability to get volunteers, retain the ones that you currently have, and maybe some recruiting techniques that you use to obtain your volunteers?
You want me to go first again? Or
Sure.
I can start. So we are beyond fortunate that we have a very dedicated group of people that come in to help us. We did see a drop off in people that were willing to come into our facility and help. So because the majority of our volunteers are retirees, some of them were very mindful of their own health and didn't want to be out in public. Some of them kept showing up and saying, my kid said I can't be here, but I'm still here. We don't tell them. And then we had an influx of people that were just, I think, ready to help with the cause because everything that was going on, and they needed to feel like they were helping make a difference. So while we saw a decrease, some people left us, we saw an increase in people that wanted to help. So for us, we didn't have a really drastic impact. We just had a shift of who was coming in and kind of that demographic. But it's been amazing to see. The phone has not stopped ringing with people that want to help our community. And if anything, I think the pandemic has increased the number of people that are reaching out to us to help because the community is really behind helping each other and making sure everybody's okay.
Absolutely. And I'd agree with almost all of those statements as well. Emergency services, we were in a recruiting crisis as it was. So just in the 1970s, we had about 300,000 emergency responders that were volunteers across the state. That number is estimated now just to be around 38,000. So it's definitely something that we had a crisis to recruit as it was. The pandemic certainly didn't, make it any easier for any of our older members. They certainly wanted to stay, at home and maybe not do as much as they had done previously. But the one thing that was mentioned before is that events like this bring out a lot of humanity. So we saw just an influx of the Heroes Work Here banners and the dropping off of food at stations. It was an amazing outpouring of support. The one thing that is kind of a spinoff of that, while that's all appreciated, the one thing that a lot of the volunteer emergency responders want is the support to be able to have the tools and the abilities to do their jobs effectively. All of those other things are nice, but the one thing that we're looking for is a lot of support. So that comes down to when your municipalities are looking to increase any type of funding so that we don't have to do fundraisers. That's an important thing. But again, as we start looking at the people, that's really the most critical part. What we see is after any type of disaster or emergency that really impacts lives, we see an influx that start to enter the field in emergency services, whether that be volunteer or career ranks. And we see one of the previous ones that we had seen was 9/11. We saw a lot of the millennials get into the emergency services as really seeing the effects of 9/11 and wanting to help. I think we're going to see that same thing with healthcare coming up in the next generation. Those that are growing up in the schools, being masked and seeing kind of the effects of COVID, they're going to want to get involved. So it's, as far as recruitment goes right now, a lot of our recruitment events were canceled or postponed or somehow altered where it just doesn't seem as effective. But I think in the long run, the one blessing is that it does raise some awareness for really all of our key community services that need help. So whether that's volunteer or career opportunities, it's really letting people know what's out there and what the needs are in their communities.
Thank you. Wow. Denny and Tammy, as you guys, I've heard about that you've ran some really great projects through the year. How has that affected your volunteerism, maybe through your membership or outside of the Grange membership and getting those projects done?
Well, with the food distribution, we've been at this since April of last year. And we came on right at the onset of when everything was really shut down. So we tried our best to try to keep things going. We unfortunately had to cancel our children's fair last year, which was a big heartbreak for us. But we continued on with fundraising dinners and takeout dinners and things like that. But in terms of the food distribution, we have a really good close-knit set of volunteers that come in each time. We put in thousands of hours in planning, setup, and running, and so we did lose a few people over the winter months because we are outside doing the distribution. So some people didn't want to brave the cold, and that was fine. We didn't want to either, but we did it, and we joke around quite a bit. We actually had a food distribution where we had 4 seasons in one day, where it rained, snowed, hot, and then cold all in the same day. So that definitely affects who helps. Some people can't be out in that kind of weather. So I think we've done very well with volunteers. And like I said, the close-knit people that come every time.
Awesome. Justin, you brought up a really good point about fundraising, and obviously any organization has to have some sort of cash flow to be somewhat successful. And, a little bit about how our organizations were previously getting their fundraising, and it sounds like almost a pandemic within a pandemic. How has that affected for your area?
So the one thing that we're seeing is also, it's a transition where because of that volunteer decline, what we've seen is there's been a need to be able to hire professional and career firefighters and EMS personnel. It's definitely happened more on the healthcare with the EMS side because those careers are certainly tied to either healthcare systems where there's some financial support in the community to do have career positions to fulfill that need. Where we're struggling is with the firefighters. A lot of it's either going to be a new tax, which nobody really appreciates, right? So there's some political tension to try and justify why do we need career firefighters when for the past 100 years we've had volunteer firefighters, and it's simply a change in our society today. But as far as the fundraising and the support, just think of it this way. There's a lot of very worthy community organizations, nonprofit organizations out there to fulfill your time. And I think every organization struggles with the point that they need to hire on, whether it be an executive director or some type of career staff to assist with certain core functions to keep the ball moving, to keep moving toward the mission every single day. And that's really the point that a lot of emergency services organizations are at. They need to figure out when is it a time to go and hire somebody to manage, when is it time for somebody to go and kind of pick up where and piece together where the volunteers may have some vulnerabilities and continuing that mission every single day. So where we're at is kind of, there's some big, very important missions that we have to respond to 911 calls, to respond to things 24/7, 365. So there's really a need for high reliability of the organization's mission. So in order to do that, each organization has to kind of look at their manpower, their staffing, and really their ability to perform that service for their community. And take a little bit of a look in the mirror. It doesn't mean failure of the volunteers. What we're seeing is a lot of combination between career staffing and volunteer staffing doing the same job, working toward the same mission, to be able to maintain some type of consistency across the board. So in order to fund that, we're looking at even the things that are tangible, like the fire trucks. How are those purchased in the past? Well, it was through fundraising efforts. Well, how many chickens does it take, barbecue chickens does it take to go and sell in order to buy a fire truck? That's the going rate for those is multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars. $500,000, $800,000 for a fire truck. How many chickens does that equal? And when you talk about the success of the fundraising efforts, we can either do it that way with a lot of community support and consistent community support, or we're going to have to look at some alternatives. And I think that's kind of where we're at. Is unfortunately costs are out of control for any organization to operate, and we're trying to figure out how to make ends meet. So creative fundraising, alternative funding sources is really where we're all looking at what do we do. And a lot of communities have turned to tax dollars because it's the most consistent and equitable way to go and pay for some of these important services.
Awesome. We had a hand raised by Tara. Tara, I think you have a question.
Yeah, I was just curious, Justin, you had said about being creative and coming up with new ideas for fundraising. I was just wondering, I think we've seen, at least I've seen, I feel like the needs of the communities are shifting over the last year. And like with Elaine and Denny and Tammy and the food distribution and stuff like that, like it's become a real, I think it's brought the idea of food insecurity to the forefront of a lot of people's minds. I think, especially in the center region where we are, I think people tend to think of this as a very affluent area. And so because of Penn State and whatnot, and they don't think necessarily that people have issues with having access to food. But have you come up with any creative ideas on fundraising that are transferable to other organizations? I know everybody, like you said, you can only sell so many chickens, and like Denny and Tammy, I know you guys have done amazing soup sales. They're awesome. I come almost every time, but like, again, you can only sell so many quarts of soup. Like, is there anything that you've kind of tapped into that could be transferable and marketable to other organizations?
Sure. So the one thing that I would actually suggest more so than anything is look for grant opportunities. There's some very unique grants out there, and there are whether it be organizations or corporate entities that are looking to do good things in their community. You just need to match up those grant funds with the right organization or the right mission. And I know such as organizations such as food banks see that all the time. Where there's corporate giving that occurs, and it's tax write-off for the corporations. It's it's again sponsorships or community mindedness. Look for community partnerships. That's really one of the key things that I would say, because where there's money in the community, if it stays in the community, that's a great thing. So definitely check out grants. The other thing is, look for unique opportunities to be able to raise funds that would help in the community. So one of the things that we had done is there's actually been some small games, a chance like bingo, that you're able to do for fundraising efforts. That obviously kind of halted, but what we saw was an emergence of more raffles. Where it's, buy a ticket and this is an item. So that maybe would be attractive for the particular community. I know kayaks were one of the things that, everybody tried to get outdoors and tried to get, active through the pandemic as best they could. But kayaks were really hard to find. Well, we got our hands on a kayak, and that was something that was able to be raffled off and with a little bit of premium, and everybody went and supported that effort. So we did rake in a good bit of funds through some raffles. So that could be another avenue.
I'm going to jump in because I echo everything Justin just said. I think the biggest place for most organizations would be sponsorship and community partners. So there's a lot of grant opportunities, even within Center County, right? There's like the Rotary has grants, and the Kiwanis has grants, and the grocery stores give grants, and right. So there's a lot of business partners that I know, like you said, Justin, like to keep their funds local. So reaching out to those businesses, banks, stores. We've done a couple different things in the past where like the one I can think of right now is like the Hallmark store at Christmas time will sell an ornament and part of those proceeds come to the food bank. So I think getting creative that way, my observation of kind of the fundraising and giving world right now is people like that, right? Like the kayak raffle, or I bought this ornament, it makes me feel good because it's also going towards this. Or like Giant has like, if you buy this bag, we give this place $1, or those types of things. So I think just thinking outside the normal fundraising box in that sense, I think really relying on the businesses within the community to help support those, your agency, essentially.
Great, thank you.
Jenny and Tammy, I did not get to purchase any soup, but can you share us a little bit about the operation that you guys started? Was that a project you had before the pandemic, or was this created from the pandemic?
Well, when we started doing the food distribution at first, when we were partnering with the YMCA, we were doing a soup and sandwich giveaway with the food distribution. So we got local partnership with the American Legion, the Penns Valley Hope Fund, and a few other organizations gave some money as well. And we targeted the seniors and veterans, and they got soup and sandwiches with the food distribution. The Grange is very well known for any kind of food. We have tried in the past year, we've done a Polish feast where we had halibki. We've done soup sales. We do a food concession at various local events, horse sales, those sorts of things. We also do the food for the gun show. So food is a very big part of how we raise our money for our local Grange. And I wanted to add too that we were talking about grants. One of the downsides of the Grange, at least the community Grange, is we don't have a 501c3. So we are not able to go and get some of these larger grant funds that other organizations are able to get. So if we go to Weiss or Wegmans, we get the 25, 50, or 100. Whereas if we had a C3, we could go in and probably get 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 for a larger project.
No, I think that's about it. Like the sound group from our Legion gave us $1,000, you know, and that's just because we're local and we're helping a lot of their members and the veterans and the elderly people in the community. So a lot of the Center Hall organizations like the Women's Club have donated money to us, but they're not able to take that as a tax write-off. So they're just doing it because we're in their community.
Awesome. Well, that brings up a really good point that we could definitely have a further discussion outside of this meeting on a state level about the 501c3, and that it's definitely an obstacle maybe in obtaining some cash flow. So
Rachel, I think Pete wants to speak to that.
Awesome. Thank you.
And I was going to bring up, you know, a lot of companies have no issue donating, and don't think it's just money. I know corporations are more than happy to give you a case of paper, a case of this, a case of that, and that type of stuff. But they want it for a tax write-off. And I didn't know whether Pennsylvania has a foundation or not. I don't know. Some states do, some states don't. You can run it through your state foundation. If not, I know in New Jersey, we have approached the National Grange, and we've had a couple Granges use the National Grange Foundation to have donations made through to them. So the donators could get a tax write-off and it helped the Grange out. So that's another avenue. And that is probably one of the biggest stumbling blocks I know are foundations. And they can be expensive to set up. They can be time consuming. So if you know a Grange that has a foundation, that's great. If not, if you approach the National Grange Executive Committee, explain to them why you have opportunity to get these grants, you need 501c3. They can help you set that up. So it's a stumbling block, but there is an answer to the stumbling block.
Yeah, to respond to Pete, the Pennsylvania State Grange does have a foundation that is a 501c3. And I know that there are stipulations that as there are with, I think, any foundations with 501c stat. Oh my goodness, I'm stuttering over my words. But the stipulations are for things like community service and education. And I believe those requests to utilize the foundation to accept donations would go through the Pennsylvania State Grange Executive Committee. But that is an option. And I know that some local Granges and some of like the state Grange departments do some fundraising through the foundation for that exact reason, that it opens the door for some more possibilities for grants and other fundraising efforts.
Can I ask a question of Denny and Tammy? This is Lizzie. I was just kind of curious, were you able to tap into any resources through Department of Ag for like food distribution or through the state programs that they were running? Or was everything funneled down to like the food bank and state college and the YMCA? I didn't know if you had a direct link where you were getting some of your supplies.
We were able to, we originally started working with the YMCA, and then it moved to the Central PA Food Bank. We have not, other than going to the local grocery stores, and some of the grocery stores have been very helpful with discounting food, donating things. Like we have an endless supply of bags, those sorts of things that we get a lot of different supplies. And so we were able to tap into some of those resources, but past that, no.
So I'm going to jump in. I'm not very familiar, I don't think, with your distribution. I remember when the Y was doing this soup and veterans and sandwich stuff, but something we can do, and I'm sure if you don't have my email already, so the State College Food Bank, part of our kind of way around maybe that 501c3 is another part of our program is not just feeding our clients, we're working on indirect services throughout the county. So we provide a lot of different programs with food so they can do their program, and essentially if they're not having to purchase food, then they can save money someplace else. So we've donated food to the Y, we donate a lot of the other pantries. So definitely reach out to us, because if we have extra to share, we'd like to share our bounty if we can. It doesn't make sense for us to hold on to it and hoard it away if we've got it and we want to make sure it's getting back out. So that's something we do to help other agencies. I know, and not necessarily even direct feeding agencies. We've been known to take stuff over to the Alphas. We take stuff to some of the lower income senior facilities in town, the different preschools that have kind of a sliding fee scale and try to serve more of a lower income population. So Strawberry Field, so multiple agencies that are feeding people, but maybe that's not their direct service. If we're able to help provide them with some of their food, then they can offset that cost in their budget too. And I do know, to answer your question, Lizzie, kind of about the government funding, that did get funneled in a couple different ways. So agencies could apply directly to the USDA, but I think they had preferred to kind of send it down through like Central Pennsylvania Food Bank or the United Way. There's already an emergency food and shelter program through the government, so there was extra funds through that. So I actually sit on that board too in my job of kind of overseeing. So I know that we put out like a call to people to say, do you need funds for specific emergency food and shelter? And I honestly, I feel like I should know this, but I don't know if like those EFSP funds are, if you can apply for them if you're not a 501c3, but that's something I will look into, because if you guys are providing emergency food, you would then qualify kind of for those funding too.
We've also gotten food from the Center Hall Potter Township Food Bank, which is like 3 doors up from our Grange Hall. They have donated food they've gotten.
That Center Hall, they're wonderful. Is that Bonnie Brown? Yep. So Bonnie, that's a great example. So we share with Bonnie too. She comes every month to pick up, we order eggs for them so they can come down and get eggs from us, and we make sure that they have those. So there's a lot of kind of sharing amongst food pantries, at least within the county. So I think that's great. I'm glad that Center Hall is helping you guys.
Yes, and if we
More than
have
happy to
extra,
also.
and if we have extra from our distributions, we have several other organizations that we can call and they'll come pick it up from us and then they'll go disperse it to the people they know who need it.
That's wonderful. I do think that's something really special about Center County is there's a really great food security network and a lot of connections there throughout the county to make sure that people are getting the food they need.
All right, thank you for that. And, as things, from day one of March 19th last year, it seemed on a daily and weekly basis that's where, oh, we have to shift this way. Oh, there's a new regulation here. And, how has that affected not just the people that you serve, but within the membership? And as things are opening up, what is easing for you guys? I hope it's getting easier, and as you've already had processes set up, but how is that changing for the better?
I don't know that it's getting easier. We had our food distribution on the 5th?
Yeah.
And we had 13 new families come in. So
Yeah.
we're 13 months into this. I was thinking we're going to start to see a decrease, but it's the opposite. We're still seeing an increase in people who need the food. So I don't know if it's sort of becoming like now the gas shortage people are talking about. Like people are really getting scared about food and the prices that are going higher, like at the grocery store. So there's more people coming in saying, we need your help.
Yeah, we're getting a lot more phone calls too, saying, I'm down, or I know somebody, or can you please reach out to this person? So we weren't getting a lot of those at first, and now it seems to be more and more.
Go ahead,
How
Elaine.
many people? My question was going, how many people would you say come through your food distribution? Roughly, how many people would you say you impact?
On a monthly basis?
Monthly basis.
We rate it by, we can break it down by kids, adults, and seniors. Typically on a monthly basis, we're seeing approximately 150 families come through. So you can break that down. Typically, we figure a family unit is at least 2 people. So 150 families is 300 people sometimes through our food distribution on any week that we do it.
And our primarily clients are Center Hall. I mean, we service all of Center County, but majority of our clients are from the local area.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know if your clients are going to the Center Hall Food Bank then too?
We have been asked that. We have asked people as they come through. We believe there's 5 that go to both. Some of the other people usually are outside of Center Hall Potter, so they're like Pleasant Gap, Bollesburg, Spring Mills. So they're right outside the Center Hall Potter area, but they're able to come to ours.
We also do a lot of deliveries. We have a lot of local, mostly members of our Grange that go and do deliveries to older people who can't necessarily come to us or because of health reasons don't want to come out. So we, deliver it to the porch and they know when we're coming and they're able to get the food they need without exposing themselves.
I'm always that optimistic, with spring coming, I'm like, it must be getting warmer and things are getting better. But I definitely appreciate hearing that the need is still increasing. And just it shocked me a little bit. So thank you for sharing that. Justin, for you and seeing volunteers with, first responders, is anything on your end getting easier, lighter?
I think the one thing, as there's measured changes with some of the gatherings, the one thing that we have really had to stumble and figure out how we're going to go and recreate in a virtual environment is really our fire prevention or any type of PR. We do a very good job of bringing our equipment, doing kind of the dog and pony show to get people, and especially children, Fire Prevention Week and EMS Week, which is actually kicking off here this coming week. getting them engaged in knowing about what we do and some of the important safety messages we try and get out in the community every year. The unfortunate part is most of those events have been either canceled or very much limited in what we were able to do with, especially the kids. So as we see some of the restrictions ease, and especially the outdoor events, I just planned later this month is a wildland fire prevention visit where Smokey the Bear is going to go through and be at an outdoor event. So that's something that it's a little bit of a breath of fresh air that we're able to do some of that stuff. Prevention is so incredibly important in our field, because if we can prevent having to actually do anything, it's much better than having to respond to anybody's emergency. So the smoke detectors, having an evacuation plan, knowing how to call 911 and access our services is so important. But it's been about 1.5 years since we've been able to share a lot of those messages, at least in a way that we can guarantee a good number of people truly did receive the message.
Awesome. A little shifting of gears, but last Saturday I had the pleasure of meeting the Hamburg Grange in Berks County, and I asked them to share some questions that they have for you. And one, Justin, was specifically, they were asking about protective gear and are local departments still needing the sanitizers, masks? What can local people just drop off?
Sure. So the shortages were pretty short-lived. We did have some shortages initially, but really once the federal supplies and all of that came in from the stockpiles, it really did ease that burden. Again, there's not really been a shortage here lately. That was more the first few months of when this first started, because this PPE that everybody was after to try and grab, we had actually carried on ambulances for some time. This was nothing new. It was really just a reemphasis and a refocus on we're doing it more often than we ever had in the past. So there's not really a shortage so much. I think what we're finding is some of the residual effects of we were focused so much on trying to find the PPE, change our way of doing business and make sure that everything's safe, that now we're trying to figure out, well, what was kind of maybe put by the wayside because we hadn't focused on it as much. So again, kind of like the PR activities, we really didn't get some aspects of our operations that were considered non-essential, for lack of a better term, or less important in the moment. That's where we're trying to kind of pick up those pieces and move on from there.
Awesome. We have another question here from my mother, Lizzie. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Mother. Okay. I just wanted to mention, because in the summer, now last year we didn't get to do anything, but at Cumberland Valley Grange, we do provide kids day camp, and we link up with the Boys and Girls Club, the summer lunch program, etc. Now, with the 501c3 that the Grange has, I was able to use it for event educational based programming. So the local Walmart gave me $2,500, and I did these one-day day camps. So in reference of trying to spread my money out and around, we would feed the kids when they would arrive, and we would make sure they had lunch before they left. And in doing that, we were able to get meals into them, because there were a lot of kids coming from, food scarcity homes, and saying that, they appreciated, and we even fed parents with that program. The other thing that we did was we had the fire truck, and we made these events fun, but yet put the educational aspects into them. So we did Christmas in July, and we decorated the garage with Christmas tree lights, and we had the fire company come do programming. But not only did they do that, they brought Santa Claus up the hill on the fire truck with them. And so it was exciting for the kids to see that, but then they got fire safety training, which was an educational program. And again, we fed them in the morning, fed them before they left. And why I was just kind of curious about like some of the state or federal, we could have easily applied for some federal help for that programming, but then I would have had to say no to parents that were hungry, because I had some show up to pick up kids that hadn't eaten, and you could tell that they hadn't eaten. And I offered, because as Grangers, we all know this, we overcook, we over provide, and we push it out. And so I invited them to come eat, and it got to be where I invited them to come on a regular basis to come have lunch with their kids when they were doing that part of it, or to hang around for breakfast in the morning. And we'd make little to-go bags too for people. But it was just a way of servicing and yet getting some money out of Walmart to provide the educational aspect of it. So there is a little crossover, and the Pennsylvania State Grange can accept those grant dollars for an educational project. So there's kind of a way to mesh it together. Like at Progress Grange, you could do cooking classes and teach the nutritional value of preparing meals, but yet they're making their food and they're getting to eat. But that's more volunteers. So it comes back to who do we have to help to run the programs too. It's kind of a vicious little cycle. Chicken or the egg first, I don't know, or who's chasing who. Or just some things that we do.
Well,
Rachel, I have a question.
Go ahead.
And it actually ties, I was going to ask it before, but it ties into what Lizzie was just saying. So Jenny, I forgot about the Polish dinner, and it was amazing. But all of those things take so much time and energy and effort. And like, I'm sure like every organization, the volunteers are aging. And so A, that's harder for them, but B, there's younger people like me who want to be involved. Not that I'm young by any means, but I want to be involved. But at the same time, I'm trying to balance the full-time job, the volunteerism, and like when you take the like how do you manage all of that? Like it's really hard. Like Lizzie, I've always thought the ideas of your day camps have been amazing, but like my Grange, we don't have enough people to run something like that. And to be honest, I mean, there's like 5 of us that do all of the work. And so we're really trying to figure out how do we recruit new members, because everybody's aged out. Like they've just, like they can't continue to contribute. So like we are stuck in this, like Lizzie said, like in this vicious cycle where we want to do good things and like help out, but we are struggling to get people in the door to sign up and help.
And I can interject real quick. That was one of the reasons why I chose like Boys and Girls Club and Summer Lunch, the organized programs, because they brought staffing with them that helped supervise, and I could split them down into teams with agricultural projects in between. And we used a lot of guest speakers for the educational components, like having the fire company come out, or I had the wildlife, what do we call that? The wildlife agent. And he came out and he taught them about, nature and Pennsylvania's wild animals. The other thing, we had Penn State, I don't know how many times, a couple times Penn State came out there and they taught the kids how to identify the plants. And here I have maple trees on the property, and they went up there and showed them how you actually, I guess, like bore the maple tree to get syrup out of it and stuff. So it's just a matter of kind of like tapping into an organization that has some resources that come with them.
That was going to be my suggestion too. So for us, like if we need to do something that's kind of outside of our ability and our volunteer force, we try to find a partner group that can help us do it. So we've done that a couple times, that like we find the Rotary, they love to volunteer. So we say, hey, Rotary, we've got this great idea. Do you want to help us? And they usually are like take it and run. So I would say finding a service organization amongst your community that needs a new project, and I think they will come to your aid.
If I could echo that, I agree. Nationwide, a lot of the Granges doing food distribution are partnering with other service organizations, and they're, as you said, everybody's looking and wanting to do. Luckily, a lot of times Granges will have a Grange Hall. They got the spot. They just need the people. And there's a lot of organizations that have the people that don't have the spot. So if we work together, it's amazing. And just ask. You know, don't be afraid to ask people. Like, we all haven't heard the word no before in our lifetime. Justin, I got a question for you. I hear your frustration with funding and volunteering and all that. And, you know, we all come from small rural areas. We've all seen it. It's a problem everybody faces. My question is, when it comes to budgets, budget time, funding cycles, do you think it would be helpful if Grangers contacted their locally elected officials when it comes to budget time, saying, hey guys, you need to make sure you support EMS, you know, the fire system. Let them know that we appreciate, as members of this community, what you're doing, and we think you know, don't be cutting your budget. Do you think
that would absolutely help?
Go ahead.
Sure, that would absolutely help. You know, the biggest thing that we run into is, you know, it's just kind of an expectation or an assumption that it's going to happen. And I think anyone who's ever worked in a volunteer organization knows that if the volunteers don't come, show up and do it, that's how volunteer organizations collapse. So, you know, the funding is just one piece to this puzzle that we face. And, you know, one of the things that I did hear before that I wanted to mention before I forgot is Denny had said something about superhero capes. You know, I think everyone can relate that there's the volunteers that are the glue that hold the organization together. And it's that same 5 people that do just about everything. That's a common thing that we see with fire departments as well. And a lot of it's going to be family based as well. The generations and generations that have gone and grouped together. The one thing that I would add, just from being a little bit more on the younger side of the spectrum, is that the one thing that a lot of the volunteers of my generation are looking for projects. They're not looking to establish a long-term relationship with one organization necessarily. They're looking for projects that they can be a part of and be proud of, that they contributed towards. So if you make your volunteer opportunities something that's project-based with an element of success right away, fairly close by, not necessarily right away, but that they don't have to guarantee an hour a week for every week now through eternity. You know, you come out on this Saturday and be a part of this project, I think you're going to find a lot more success there. So did that answer your question? You know, absolutely. I think there's opportunities with trying to partner and then also just advocate. I think every organization understands the needs of advocating their mission, and we just need a lot of help with that.
I absolutely love that, because to be honest with you, I can't train to be a firefighter. That's just not in my blood. Nor would you want me to be the one to respond to that. So hearing that, you know, looking for those smaller short-term projects and how I can be involved, rather than thinking, okay, let me get trained and, you know, fire up the hose.
That's not your life away to that organization, right? I mean, that's sometimes, I guess, what people feel like when you ask them to volunteer. They're like, oh, now every month I got to come to your meeting, and every month I have to be a part of this. Whereas, like, what we try to do is, like, we know there's certain people who are never going to come to the meetings, but, oh, can you come pack bags for families? They're there every time. So we kind of enable those people to use them when we can and when they feel comfortable, but they're not obligated to be there all the time or for the rest of their lives.
I can interject it. Like in SHIP, we have what I always refer to as friends of the Grange. And so even neighbors that would know the kids would be coming because people thought I was nuts. We would have anywhere maybe to 50 to 100 kids for a day camp. But they would leave like watermelons at my back door if I wasn't home. I'd come home and find cases of water, bags of chips, that type of stuff. And so it was nice to have those friends, and some of those friends, they were involved in church organizations, so we were able to get clearances and they would come and even help too. But for this summer, I've had one contact from like the summer lunch program. So to give you an example, there's 20 kids that they want to bring in August, but they have 4 adults coming with them. So it's very manageable when I know that they've got 4 adults coming to help pull off programs with us.
Well, our program will be wrapping up here shortly, and I just wanted to share some of the random acts of kindness that our Grangers from Hamburg, Grange, and Berks County shared with us. And I just wanted to know, what's something small that we can do there. What we're talking about a lot today is some big operations, local operations, but it all starts with just one simple act of random kindness. And it's so heartwarming to read some of these cards that they wrote out for me. And one member had sewn over 500 masks since March and donated to friends, family, and also for hospitals. Another small act of kindness, but probably meant everything, was one gentleman took neighbors and a few friends to their doctor's appointments so that they felt comfortable. Another was that their wife was sick for 3 weeks with COVID, and he sat by her bedside until she was well. And people were cleaning out their closets, donating to the Goodwill, and donated books to the wards of the state hospital for sharing their books during that lonely time. But what I would like to kind of wrap up and end with is, what is a random act of kindness that maybe you've seen, done, witnessed, been on the recipient end of? I'd love to hear that from you guys.
Oh, I have a story to tell. Probably about 7 or 8 months ago, I got one of the people that came through the food distribution line started to tell me this very tear-felt story about how the food that we give out not only impacts that family, but they go back home. And this was during when things were still quarantined and things were pretty shut down. They would go back home, make a meal, and all the neighbors would get together in the backyard and eat as a group. And those are the kind of stories that really choke me up, because when you're hearing this, you're thinking, wow, the impact of what we're doing is really magnified. And those people have been through our line since the beginning. And every week they bring up, Margaret made potato salad to go with this fish, or, and you hear these stories, and it's absolutely humbling to hear these stories.
Thank you, Denny, for sharing that.
I think for us, one of the things we did with our Grange was we actually put together little bags for our local fire company, and we wrote, it was a survival kit, and we actually, and this seems so insignificant. I mean, it seemed insignificant to us when we were doing it, but we wrote each person's name on the bag so that it was directed. It wasn't just like, oh, here's a bunch of stuff. It was directed to them individually. And the response that we got from that was, I mean, the firefighters, I mean, it's a small little fire company, but they were so grateful for it. And it really just was like, okay, this is why we need to keep doing these things. And then we don't have a Grange Hall. So we actually meet in our local township building, and we had things that were left over from those bags, and the township won't let us pay them. They won't let us do anything for using the space, which is awesome. But so we just left all of the stuff that was left over there with a note that was like, thanks for letting us use this. And we got, I think, 3 or 4 emails. I mean, and this is a very small township, but we got 3 or 4 emails the next day thanking us for just like the candy bars and I think there were a couple bottles of Gatorade and things like that were left there for them. So, you know, it just makes you think that it doesn't, like we were saying earlier, it doesn't have to be this like big grand gesture to say thank you, because I think our society has kind of gotten away from saying thank you, right, in general. So when you do the littlest things, people are touched by it.
Awesome. Well, we can open it up. If anybody has any other comments or questions, you're all welcome to hop in here.
Well, Rachel, I want to thank you because I wrote notes. I never write notes. and of course, now I got to translate and figure out what I wrote, but it's got me thinking about a couple different things, and I appreciate that. Every time I have an opportunity to meet with Grangers, I learn new things, and just don't use the term small. When you do something, don't call it small, because as Tara said, it might be small to you, but at that point, or as Denny said, the impact you're having on that person might be the one thing they needed that day to keep them going.
Mm-hmm.
So don't call it a small, just call it random act of kindness, call it whatever you want. Don't ever say it's small, because there's somebody out there that, you know, you could have saved their life that day, you know, and you don't know it. So it's all about the little things that well, not to use that term, but that's what we do. And you know, I hear the stories and it's fantastic. I appreciate it. That's why I do what I do. For those who don't know who I am the National Grange Community Service Director. I was state president in New Jersey for years. I live in Myrtle Beach now. But so I see, Justin, when you're talking about small volunteer departments, trust me, you want to talk small town?
New Jersey, I go there frequently.
A traffic light in our town, so you know. I get it. I get the frustrations and the food banks and all that, and I guess we don't realize how important this is. And Ellen, you talk about, you know, I never knew the term food deserts until recently. You know, and a lot of people don't realize they probably live in a food desert, don't even realize it.
Yep.
And the scary part is, and what you folks are doing with food distribution, there are towns where the people are buying their food at the dollar store because that's the closest grocery store they have. And we know how unhealthy that is.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think these food distributions y'all are doing are fantastic, and keep up the good work. It's great. And you know, the Granges in Pennsylvania just do amazing things. You guys are always out finding new ways to do things, adapting, overcoming, working through. And it's an inspiration to me. So Rachel, I appreciate the opportunity to be on here today. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Tara, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing for everybody that's here and that will watch this later. Part of the reason we asked Elaine to be here today is because for the state family festival, we will be accepting donations for the State College Food Bank. So Elaine is working on generating a list of items that we will be collecting for them. And so keep your eyes out for that as the summer progresses. And then she will be on site during Family Festival in July to accept the donations.
Yes, thank you. We're excited about that. And now that I know Tammy and Denny, I might reach out to them and see what they need to, so we can share some of that.
That's great. That's what this is all about, right? Like connecting the people.
Yeah.
And actually our children's fair is that weekend. So that Saturday, the kids are supposed to walk across the road and come over to our children's fair.
Even
Great.
better. Wonderful.
Well, thank you all to our panelists. You're truly a backbone to your communities locally and statewide. So thank you for all that you've done and continue to do. From here, I'd like to turn it back over to Jen and we can close it up.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you to our panelists, and thank you to everybody who joined us this morning on Zoom, and to everybody who will watch this later on YouTube. Thank you very much for attending, and I will encourage you to join us next Saturday, May 22nd, for our next virtual leadership workshop, which will be led by Philip Veneta, who is the State Grange Junior Director. So we'll look forward to seeing you then. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.